Hi guys, nice to see you. My name is Andrew Zeleno. I'm a professional audio engineer with more than 10 years of experience in professional field. For the last 6 years, I'm a teacher for audio production and audio mixing course. And my students say this course has advantage over other courses because of unique teaching approach. You can see reviews of some of my students on the left side of the screen right now. You can pause and read. I highlighted with yellow color most important statements. In this way you can save some time reading. We have top theory. It was main idea of this course, like include everything related to audio production in one course. All approaches in mixing, showing different sides of mixing, great approach, great philosophy. But the most important, we have homework checking. You choose your own projects in any genre you want, and I show you how I check your homeworks in real time, showing exactly how to make decisions. I show you reactions, we train ability to hear, and we're not just only listening your projects, we actually compare your projects to top sounding mixes of all time made by top audio engineers. And we never stop until you get real results. So it's all about real skills. I've tried to filter all bullshit related to audio and concentrating on nuances, bringing real results to your audio quality. The course is really affordable for the same amount of money. You just can buy some pair of monitors, like average microphone or 3-4 plugins, but it doesn't guarantee any real results. On my course, I guarantee results. And this course in Skype, and you pay monthly, so you're on a safe side and you will see efficiency of this course. Obviously, it's better to see it instead of just to hear about that, right? So if a free trial class is available, you can send me an email and I can include you to one free trial class with current students to check it out. And don't forget all these videos, it's only additional stuff to my course. The best stuff, obviously, I keep for the course, so if you want like real serious education, check the course. We're gonna have a new video every week. Subscribe, hit the bell notification button, not to miss new videos. If you want to support the channel, put a like and any comment. In this way you support my channel. Let's start. Using analog channel strips, compressors, EQs in modern mixing, which is supposed to be like in digital domain. You still need to consider many different things. What if your channel strip is mono, but you want to process stereo channel? You should understand it should be processed in real time. You should understand gain staging. You should understand what's the difference between headrooms. I'm gonna show you connection, and in the end of this video I'm gonna tell you my own opinion if you really should consider buying some analog stuff for your mixing or not, pros and cons. So first of all, you can see in my studio analog stuff, right? Obviously when I record something I use preamplifiers, I use external converter, which is a part of this channel strip. It's solid state logic, shortly speaking SSL, which I absolutely prefer over any other converter. When I mix, sometimes I use analog channel strip, $5,500 American channel strip. 2 boxes, it's called SSL Mynx. Basically it's just chassis. Next thing, I have 4 modules over here, SSL modules. SSL preamplifier, SSL 4000 series EQ, SSL 9000 series EQ, and SSL Dynamics, which has compressor and expander gate built in it. SSL alpha channel, and basically having this stuff I don't need stuff from channel strip itself, so I just use a converter from that. You can see new project in DAW. Okay, let's start first of all with connection. I kind of try to imagine how like more regular user can use it, where you have just pretty simplistic audio interface. It will be probably simple, let's say digital input, so-called Spdif. Pretty old audio interface. I don't need a new one because my converter and preamps much higher quality. Neve 1073 SSL SuperAnalogue preamp, so I don't need it from my audio interface. Plus converters, as I said, I use external one. So I just need any audio interface which has digital input. SSL preamp module, which consists preamplifier, instrumental input, line input, and filters. On the rear side of these modules, of course, I can put cables in any way, so I can have different orders, not just like you see over here. According to how it looks like, the next one is 4000, next one is 9000, next one is Dynamics, and finally is channel strip. So this is the rear side of SSL alpha channel. I put it to the left side of alpha channel itself, And this is how the rear side of SSL preamp module looks like. These two is the same and these two is the same. I'm gonna show you only analog side of connection, and then I'm gonna show you what exactly I do in DAW. We need any line output on your audio interface. First and the second one, it's for monitors. I don't use first and the second one because I already have built-in amplifiers inside of monitors. So I should avoid using two amplifiers in one chain because it will be like double coloration. To get more like true and realistic picture of audio I work with, I should exclude one of amplifier. So I don't use first and the second output, I use only third and fourth. Two monitor mixers, I have them on the left side, as long as I have 3 pair of monitors plus 7th monitor for mono checking, and I have subwoofer. As you understand, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different monitors, so I have 2 different monitor mixers. On the left side you don't see it. They are not occupied, number 5 and number 6 output of my audio interface, and I connect first module, this one, SSL preamp module. So what I do, I put a balanced cable from the 5th to the line input. First input, it's a microphone input. It has totally different resistance. You always should think about resistance. You really should know what kind of inputs your device has. So you should consider exactly line input. In my case, it's 10 kilo ohm. So this is our first cable, like this. What I consider is so-called difference in headroom. It's what a lot of people don't consider or don't understand at all. Definitely recommend you to understand gain staging and what's the difference between 0 dbFS and 0 dbVU, and you should know what kind of headroom each of your device has. This preamplifier is 9000 series. They call this technology SuperAnalogue, which means they have extended range. In frequency response, they have higher headroom. A lot of people believe it's always like 18 decibels, but actually it's not. In this case, we have 26 decibels, so it's extended headroom. In this case, Focusrite audio interface has that classic minus 18 decibels. So higher than 0 dbVU, you still have some room, right? And it's 18 decibels above 0, above analog 0, above 0 dbVU. SSL 9000 has 26 decibels, which means, on my course we have so many topics related to these things, thinking about what kind of channel strips we use, even in plugins. Some emulations have this proper implementation of this. If you go a bit higher than that, you get natural compression and saturation, so you really should understand all this stuff. Today we don't have time for it. I believe it's not proper explanation, but it will be just fast explanation to get to the point. Let's imagine the highest peak of your kick was, let's say, minus 6 decibels distance, right? 12 decibels. 12 decibels above this analog 0. If you send this level to next device, which has higher headroom than that, it was higher than analog 0 by 12 decibels. But when it comes to new device, it also will be 12 decibels above analog 0, but distance to the headroom will be much further. So basically speaking, if I don't touch anything and I just re-record in my system waveform back to DAW, so if waveform of this drum was like this, after re-recording it will be actually looking like this. In reality, in the final it will be looking like this. And you know how many decibels? 8. Difference between 18 and 26 is 8 decibels actually. So it means in the final I'm gonna have second waveform 8 decibels quieter. And you can be confused because when you in real mixing process, actually you want faster process. You want really not to think about all this stuff. You just want to put some settings. You need to think about how your instrument sounds on its own, how this instrument works with other instruments, if they create some artificial frequency conflicts, if they take specific space in the mix, not the whole space in the mix. So you need to think about audio, right? You don't want to think about all these technical aspects, but you have to think about that. It's not just a plugin, you know. You sometimes don't want to lose this 8 decibels every time when you process your signal. So you can compensate it. In my case, when I send signal from audio interface to this first module line input, over here you can see the specific gain sensitivity. So I have to put somewhere where it's plus 8 decibels. I calibrate it in the proper way, and in this case when I send signal to my analog chain, I have exact level like it it would be in any type of plugins. So as you can see, it's already first disadvantage, you need to think about headrooms. Then when you work with any other processor, you need to think about if you reach headroom. For example, you have this snare drum, and then let's imagine you put equalizer on it. And let's say you decided to boost a lot of upper mid-range on this snare. Like this. When you do it over here on the right side of this equalizer, you see plus 4 decibels clipping, which means your signal will be distorted. It sounds dirty. It sounds dirty, it goes to your audio interface converter, and your converter will cut all these peaks. So it will be harsh sound. In analog it's not so obvious, there is not always some red alarm. For example, if I use this equalizer, I use this green up, green gain, and I boost it all the way plus 15 decibels, suddenly I can have clipping. And I don't see it exactly on these equalizer modules, because there is a risk that you're gonna go higher than headroom. Obviously, if your levels are relatively low, something like around analog 0, you're pretty on the safe side. You know, nowadays in electronic music, let's say, a lot of people can have samples which look like this, you know, they almost all the way up to the headroom. So when you send it to analog chain, it will be almost next to the headroom, maybe 2 decibels below. You boost with 5-6 decibels on EQ and suddenly you go higher than digital 0, and suddenly you have clipping, awful harsh, like clipped sound, right? So it will be a problem. So you should think about that. You have 2 different equalizers here, black knob, 4000, brown knob, 2 different flavor of old-fashioned SSL EQ. Then you have 9000 series equalizer. Some people don't know that 9000 series EQ and 4000 series EQ is not interchangeable. As you know, I'm a crazy guy, right? I do all these tests, I measured curve, I measured level of distortion of each EQ, and actually they sound really different. You can crank level almost up to headroom with 9000 series and it will not be distorted. With 4000 series it's much more pronounced. If you send loud level to this equalizer, you get much more saturation from equalizer itself. So it's not just like in plugins when you can throw any level on some plugins and it sounds all the time the same. So you should consider coloration level of these different equalizers. And actually this one is called E equalizer, and this EQ also has E mode. And actually they don't have exactly the same curves. I sent different noises on it to measure frequency response, and actually they have a bit different curves. So we can consider them like 4 different equalizers in these 2 modules. How I connect my signal to alpha channel, this channel strip, is really unusual. First of all, line input of this preamplifier input actually really colored by variable harmonic driver, which is built in this preamplifier of this channel strip. So it means if I send line level to this channel strip and I put my cable over here, I all the time gonna have some oversaturated signal. Because of harmonic driver, all the time gonna put some additional coloration to the signal. So it's a big problem. I personally don't want any random additional coloration, so I avoid it, and instead of using preamp module, I actually go rear side of this alpha channel and I put my cable over here into return. Return is line input, which is not connected to any variable harmonic driver, and it just translates signal clearly. So that's why it's to be on the safe side, not to get any crazy coloration to the signal, not to make it dirty. Actually, this approach has one specific disadvantage. You have filters. It's nice high-pass filters known with third order 18 decibels per octave. Really nice musical sounding filters, 9000 series SSL. The problem is you cannot use them in this way. Insert goes actually after filter. If I use this return, I will not be able to use these filters at all because they stay before insert module. It's like when you can send some signal from somewhere else. Let's say like I send it from the compressor. As you can see, it's some disadvantage of this system. So I cannot use those filters. In my case, it's no problem because I already have those variable filters. It's even better because they are variable in preamp module. I can decide if I want this equalizer or not. And then I have this nice, amazing converter, which is built in this alpha channel. I use this Spdif output, typical digital cable, to Spdif in of audio interface over here, as you can see on this picture. So Spdif out goes to Spdif in. It's already digital information. Now let's talk about how you use it inside of DAW, because it's pretty tricky as well. Let's imagine we have next situation. So let's say we want to process this snare with analog device. We have mono file, right? So probably you should understand. It's all about format of your audio. If you, let's say, work with rock songs, metal songs, most of your tracks are mono. You have kick in mono, kick out mono, snare in mono, snare top mono, snare bottom mono. You have left overhead in mono, right overhead in mono, left room track in mono, right room track in mono, bass DI in mono, bass amped track, it's in mono. You have lead vocal in mono, left, let's say, background vocal in mono, right background vocal in mono, left guitar in mono, right guitar in mono. In this case, it's totally fine because your channel strip is mono. Nowadays, when people work with electronic music, you have almost all tracks in stereo, right? Some people don't hesitate. Even if your kick is mono, you still can represent your kick as a stereo channel with two waveforms, right? Just like total copy of the same waveform on the left side and on the right side. So some people don't mind to have only stereo tracks no matter if real audio is mono or stereo. But now let's talk quickly about mono. So it's pretty simple. What you do, first of all, you create so-called analog plugin. How you do it? We go to audio connections, and over here you have so-called external effects. So add external track, we use mono, as long as our channel is mono. We call it somehow, let's say, SSL-X. Why X? Because I already have many different SSL plugins. I was official tester for SSL company Duende bundle. So SSL-X, I press OK. Remember this fifth output on my audio interface, so fifth out, number 5, and then I go and I choose over here input number 5. So it's input number 5. Now you can put this plugin into insert of your mono tracks. You go to Stainberg, because manufacturer of dbVU Stainberg company. You go to external plugins. See, they call it external plugins. And this is our plugin SSL-X. I choose it. And this is how interface of this plugin looks like. Not so cool, right? It's not like some nice design, but whatever. Amazing design here. So you can look at this device day and night, not even using it, and it can inspire you. We all like fans of gear, right? Okay, it's bullshit. I'm not gonna tell it in this video. Okay. Again, if you really advanced audio engineer, sometimes you work with this send gain and return gain, thinking about gain stage, and you can consider what kind of level of this waveform, if you can adjust it when you send it to analog device, what kind of level you want to grab back to the DAW. But again, you can just keep it at 0 and 0 as a return. Also, a lot of people don't consider is some delay what your equipment produces. Your equipment actually can create a bit of delay. Let's say converter in your audio interface usually needs something like half of millisecond to process your signal. When it will be in analog as electricity going through the whole chain, it goes back to your audio interface, and a converter which is called analog digital converter, ADC converter, also needs something like half of millisecond to process your signal. So you actually, with this plugin, can measure how many milliseconds it takes to throw your signal back to DAW. For this, you have this button over here in your DAW. You press it, and it measures it. It's usually something around, you know, like 1 millisecond, 2 milliseconds. But why it's important? If you're not gonna measure it, when you re-record your waveform to DAW, if you don't make this kind of a delay in advance by this plugin, by that button, your waveform of your snare will be 2 milliseconds, let's say 2 milliseconds later. You can say it's not a big deal, 2 milliseconds only, just a bit later, nobody hears like 2 milliseconds. But the problem is, it can be problem with the phase. If you process, let's say, acoustic drums, your snare sounds not only from a microphone called snare mic, right? Your snare sounds from the snare bottom mic, your snare sounds from overhead left, your snare sounds from overhead right. Maybe your snare was in perfect phase between different microphones. They was blended in a perfect way. Do you think it's only related to live music? No, if you're an electronic musician, it's the same. Because, let's say, your kick can be from a couple of samples. You know, like layering for your kick, for your snare. It could be layering for your synthesizer, bass. Then, let's say, you just process one of those tracks with your analog chain, and suddenly, your bass, first track of a bass, will be later in time. Which means If one waveform goes up, other waveform goes down, and they have phase cancellation. So it's awful situation. So this amazing idea, what these engineers of this DAW created, they can measure how many milliseconds it takes to process your waveform after processing, not to make any shifts, you know, like to be later. And it will be exactly the same waveform like it was originally. So in this case, you have no difference between processing in plugins or processing in analog. It will be the same absolutely, in terms of not having any problems with phase. When Cubase DAW didn't have this function called render in place, it was pretty kind of painful to process all these waveforms with analog chain. You had to put markers from the left to the right, then you had to go to File, Export, Audio Mixdown, you had to choose let's say real-time processing, you should choose like formats, you should check mono down mix if you wanted mono tracks as a final waveform. Obviously if your snare mono, maybe you want to keep it like mono, you know, so you had to choose, let's say, not to process your signal through the master bus where maybe you have for some reason some plugins. In this case, you had to really know what track it is. You should have named all tracks in the proper way. Then you should check it over here as a source of audio. So it was like pretty not convenient, to be totally honest. Nowadays, it's amazing because now you have a function called render in place. You go to edit, you choose render in place, and you just press render. That's all. It will know that you have analog chain connected to your channel, and it will say render will be in real time, and you say okay, and start rendering it. And you don't need to create any markers, so you just select the whole clip, it will know exactly. So it will render in other waveform already processed by your analog channel strip. What's cool about this function, you actually can have even other plugins. So let's say you use SSL and then, for example, you say to yourself, okay, I want to grab some compressor, right? And you say, okay, I'm gonna be using 1176. You put 1176 after your virtual analog plugin, and when you process, you're not gonna have this SSLX plugin, but you can include this compressor in processing, or you can exclude, which means it could be like waveform processed by analog chain, but you can have this 1176 compressor just like as a regular plugin in the same way, just to process your signal in real time. A signal just with analog plugin, or you want to include some plugins. In 2 minutes I'm gonna tell you pros and cons of really using analog channel strip. I need to tell you about word clock. Some device should decide and synchronize all other converters to work like. So for this you need to decide if your audio interface will be this word clock kind of master, or you want to have external word clock. So this device called SSL alpha channel has built-in word clock, and I noticed if I use word clock built-in in audio interface, for some reason on the background I hear these little clicks, you know, like little kind of a click, 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 click all the time. So it's not working actually with this SSL stuff. Only in case if I use external word clock, which is built in SSL. In this case, I have perfect clear recording. To make it, I need to open mixer of my audio interface, and I need to hit this external lock button. As you can see, it's highlighted now, which means I already turned it on. So in this case, it will be no problem. But as you can see, it's already a disadvantage because you need to think about that, you shouldn't forget about that and all this stuff. So as you can see, analog processing, it's always a bit like more complicated than working with plugins. What to do if you have stereo synthesizer? For example, you have this pad, right? It's pad from Omnisphere synthesizer. So as you can see, it has difference between left and the right channel. Left waveform doesn't look like the right waveform. Secondly, you can measure it. Like this, it shows you pretty wide. So also on correlator, you can see it goes to even negative phase, which means it's so different waveform on the left side and on the right side that we even have out of phase situation here between left and right channel. So it's super wide sounding. Actually, on the course, students have advanced skills on panning, like understanding of all this phase, and actually even on the 9th month of the course we have this amazing topic, phase. It's pretty unique stuff. I never seen any information of this kind on the internet. So phase is super important because sometimes phase is the king of mixing situation. Sometimes you cannot fix it with the EQ until you really understand all this stereo positioning and phase things. On the course I always teach people to really see all little molecules, because honestly chasing after somebody's settings when you just, collect in your mind or somewhere you write down something like this guy does this guy does this, it actually doesn't help a lot. Because in real situation, in some mixing situation, you always need to figure out real kind of moment. You really should understand this is like this is like this, and that's why I need to do this or this. If you just all the time apply somebody's settings in some random scenarios, usually you get like random results. So that's why all these little nuances is super important to know. It's not just like we need to find some magic settings, there is no magic settings. It's all about little molecules of audio. So how we can process this stereo channel with analog chain, right? So it's a bit crazy. Obviously you can say we can render it in real time, like channel by channel, let's say like left side of the synthesizer, and then as a second take like right channel of the synthesizer. Don't you think you need to find some way when it's clear how you want to process this pad before you process it? And it's impossible because you can process only one channel at a time. Right? So it's a bit complicated here. If you want to boost some frequencies or cut, or how you want to compress it, I'm gonna share my own way how exactly I do it. First of all, I put a plugin on this channel strip absolutely in the same way like we already did it with the mono track. In this case it's useful because you don't need to create some new plugin, some stereo version of the plugin, because my purpose is to concentrate on audio decisions. I don't want to spend my time on something like connection, like all this workflow complexity. The only thing I want is just like press a couple of buttons and just make decisions on audio. So that's why I use absolutely the same plugin. Again, I go to Stainberg, I choose external plugin, and I just use absolutely the same configuration. Mono out, mono in. That's it. I can measure again delay. When you do it, the problem is your analog chain processing right now only left channel. Right channel of this pad will be absolutely untouched. So now I need somehow to get rid of the right channel. Synthesizer anyway sounds more or less in the same way, right? It's the same timbre made by a specific oscillator, some modulation from the synthesizer. So it will be pretty similar on the left and on the right side. More or less, I mean, right? So I can decide on this pad just listening on the left side of this pad. When you listen to stereo, it helps you to avoid frequency conflicts. When you listen to in mono, you can put yourself even in harder conditions where you start to hear all these frequency conflicts between this pad and other instruments, and you actually can make better decisions on how you want to process this pad. So it works for us. What I do, I use panning. I just make this pad just all the way to the left with panorama. As long as I have a so-called balanced panner, it means when I put panorama on this synthesizer all the way to the left, it doesn't mean I sum left and right channel of this pad and put it to the left. No, actually this panner is nothing else but volume control. It means when the pen is in the center, we have loud signal of the left side of the synthesizer and loud signal of the right side of the synthesizer. If I put this panorama all the way to the left, it means I still have the same loud left side of the synthesizer and absolutely silent right monitor. So I'm not gonna hear that right side of the synthesizer. Basically speaking, now you see these two waveforms. Left waveform will be the same and it will sound from the left monitor, while right waveform will disappear at all. This mono plugin, which is put on stereo channel, will be processing only left signal. Over here in Cubase you have so-called E button. You open it, and over here, as you can see, it says SSLX, and if you open this routing editor, you can see that this plugin right now processing only left side of the channel, of the stereo channel, which means right channel goes through with no processing. Left channel will be processed by our analog chain. But as long as our panorama all the way to the left, you're not gonna even hear what's going on the right side. So you're not gonna hear any unprocessed signal. So it means you're gonna hear only processed left side of the synthesizer, which is our goal. You listen to your mix, and this synthesizer just sounds on the left side. Do you think it's a big deal? No. it's fine because your kick sounds in the center, which means your kick sounds in the left monitor as well. You hear your snare from the center, but it still sounds on the left side. So your pad gonna do something with your kick and snare in the left monitor. Your vocal is in the center. It's still in the left monitor as well as in the right monitor. So now you hear your pad in the left speaker with your processing. You hear your vocal, your kick, your bass, your pretty all instruments in the left speaker. And now you can adjust frequencies of your pad. You can decide if you want a bit more transparent, low mid, you want to boost upper mid to get a bit more presence or clarity. You can decide on different frequencies. You can use so-called sweep technique to find some bad resonances of your instrument to cut it out. So finally you can make decisions on your sound. In this case there is so many additional tricks. If, for example, you can turn your monitor off, right one, and you can consider just left side of your mix. It will be called like mixing just by left side of your song, you know. So it's pretty cool technique, actually giving you a lot of benefits. In this case you don't help yourself with stereo field, which unmasks stereo conflicts. You're actually gonna put yourself in more complicated situations and you're gonna hear all these problems in the left speaker of your mix. In this case you're gonna work better on your pad to make more clarity in your mix. Also, you can hit mono button and you can consider it like mono mixing. In this case, everything will sound in the center in between monitors, and you're gonna have mono kick, mono snare, mono vocal, mono bass, mono other synthesizers in mono, guitars in mono, piano in mono, and that pad in mono as well. So it will be like just typical mono mixing. Press this render in place and you get a final waveform, right? If your waveform eventually will be stereo, it's not a big deal because left channel will be processed by your analog chain and right side actually will be rendered in this case. Right channel will be untouched. And you can say, oh my god, it's a kind of a mess in the mix because left signal right now processed and right channel is not. It's not a big deal. You just grab final waveform and you put it all the way to the left with panorama. In the same way like you did with the original track. In this case, ask yourself, what happens when you put panorama all the way to the left? When you have balanced panner, I mean balanced panner, don't mix up it with Pro Tools separated two panorama controllers. So in this case, you hear left process synthesizer with your analog chain and right channel just not sounding at all, because you put panorama all the way to the left, so you mute it. Then you need to process the right channel. It's just technical procedure, you don't need to reconsider something or readjust something. The only thing what you do, you go to this E menu, you open this so-called, I press open routing editor, and now I just flip the channel. I press this arrow and this analog chain now will be processing the right channel of this same pad. Now I press, again I go to edit, render in place. The only thing what you need to do, you just grab the second processed waveform and you put it all the way to the right. In this case, you keep right channel which is processed, you're gonna keep only the right channel which is processed, and you're gonna hide left channel which is not processed. So eventually you're just gonna have two stereo files, one to the left, one to the right. You can group it, you can split waveforms, you can combine two waveforms in one stereo track. No problem at all. I totally understand, I feel your pain, I feel your... because it's so complicated, you need to process one channel, second channel, and I totally ready to give you my opinion if it's good idea to work with analog chains nowadays. So let's start with advantages. First of all, it's the audio quality. Plugins sound great, you don't get me wrong, I am a fan of plugins. Actually, in 99% of situations I still mix in the box. I don't use analog processing that often as you can think. So I mostly mix in the box. The problem is I definitely have absolutely all emulations on SSL. Universal Audio, Softube, Cancel One, Slate, SSL Duende, Waves, and any other emulations, I check them all. So the problem is they all different sounding. I absolutely don't have any plugin which sounds exactly the same like analog SSL. As you know, I'm a crazy guy, I tested them million times. I spent years of testing, making those comparisons, so I measure even those devices with white noise, trying to figure out curves. I noticed a lot of different strange things, like in some plugins you put some knob at 3K, but in reality it shows you like higher frequency 4.5K instead of 3 on other plugin, and suddenly when you put it at 3, the same knob, suddenly it actually raises 2K. I compare them side by side on many different mixes with all these different monitors in different situations, in different headphones, in the car, you know, using different ears, different speakers, and I pretty never found any plugin which is like 100% copy of SSL. They all close, they sound amazing, I use them in 99% of situations, I mean plugins, but if I want to be totally honest, like root honesty, I should say plugins don't copy analog equipment. They really close, they give you great results, you still can get amazing top quality audio with just plugins, but they are not 100% analog devices. So if you kind of want some like alternative, a bit different sounding kind of result, analog is always great benefit. It sounds just a bit different. Actually, in my opinion, it's also about tolerance. You know, on analog mixing console, when you have many SSL equalizers, each SSL equalizer can be just a bit different. I mean, it's really subtle difference, but one EQ tends to be a bit transparent, other EQ tend to be a bit like smoother, darker, so sometimes it happens because there is always tolerance in all these resistors, potentiometers. I consider it for myself in the same way. Each plugin is like EQ with its own tolerance, you know, this EQ a bit smoother, I use them in these situations, this EQ is a bit like harsher or maybe more detailed, and I use it in these situations, and analog is just like my another SSL version, you know. So it's a great approach, nothing wrong with that. Second advantage of using analog is obviously like exciting moment, right? When you have equipment, when you look at all these knobs, it's all toys for us, right? We like all these lights, all these knobs. Equipment can inspire you, you know. But honestly, it's not a big deal, right? Probably. Third advantage of analog device is that fact that you train your ears. You know, when you're with plugins, you always make these excuses like, okay, I set up my equalizer in some way, it doesn't sound the best, but I'm gonna go back to it later, I'm gonna adjust, I'm gonna tweak later. So you kind of all the time make yourself some room to make some little mistake. You kind of say, okay, I'm gonna come back later, okay, I'm gonna fix it later. When you work with analog, you understand. Right now you need to set up it only in one way and it should be the best possible result. So you don't give you a chance to undo something, to redo something. So you kind of train yourself to make like final decent instant decision. In some way it can be helpful. In my opinion, one of the most important advantages what I got from having analog equipment is that understanding that it's all about your skills, it's not about your gear. A lot of people, when they start working with audio, they say, okay, now it doesn't sound too good, doesn't sound too professional, it's just because of I don't have this equipment, in a couple of years I'm gonna buy better room, better monitors, better acoustic panels, I'm gonna put better devices, maybe I will buy a couple of real preamplifiers like NIF 1073, all this, you know, like marketing bullshit, like you really need these classic devices, you really need all these kind of legendary tools. Of course they are great, as you can see I use them all, but anyway, after I really got all these things, you know, I bought Gibson Custom Shop Les Paul guitars for like $5,000, I have all these monitors, I have this expensive channel strip. Eventually I realized it's not about gear, because no matter what you buy, no matter what kind of microphone you buy, anyway, in the final it will be depending only on how you place this mic, how you understood proximity effect, what kind of preamplifier level you chose, what kind of gain staging you chose, how much you cranked your preamp to get proper amount of coloration. If you felt from your experience how much it needs, how equalizer will take your sound. If it's too colorful, later it will not be helpful because you put additional colorful EQ and your sound start to be only dirtier. You know, when you're really advanced audio engineer, you start to realize it's all about your movements, about your skills. So I'd say we all spent years and years and years just for one important lesson. After you have everything, you start to realize, no, I should have spent more time in my skills, in testing, in listening, in learning, you know, to get education, you know, to practice more. But most people kind of try to make excuses like saying, okay, I don't have enough equipment, I didn't buy better audio interface. You know, you can go buy like $3,000 audio interface. Do you think your mixes will sound top after just buying audio interface? Or you just buy a more expensive microphone and do you think your mixes will sound better because of that? Of course not. So I absolutely appreciate and I'm thankful for all this equipment, because eventually I ended up with the idea I'd better go with absolutely small kind of setup where I have just, let's say, dbVU, a couple of monitors, a bit treatment in my room, but I will concentrate. I'm not gonna buy like too many plugins, I'm not gonna buy too many different analog equipment. I'd better practice more, I'd better learn something, and in this case I definitely will push myself much closer to the level I want than just like spending years and thousands dollars on equipment you actually really don't need. Actually, pretty soon we're gonna have really interesting video. I'm gonna list different equipment which I believe you don't need, so it will be pretty interesting, and so don't miss it. Okay, now let's talk about disadvantage of having analog in mixing. Absolutely number one place here is that fact that you don't have fine tuning. You know, fine tuning actually it's a blood of mixing. Is the most important, because just imagine you have absolutely unprocessed mix. Let's say you started with a kick. The problem is you cannot really make final decisions for your kick, not having clarity in the bass, not understanding how your kick settings will be working with settings on the bass, how your kick settings will be working with the kick out, how your kick in settings will be working with left overhead settings. So when you start processing in analog, sometimes it's very difficult to predict if it will be really final settings or not. When you work in plugins, you have no problem, because when you do fine tuning, when you've done this so-called fast mixing, you come back to individual tracks and you start to adjust it a bit. You will not be able to do it if you have just one channel strip and you process track by track by track. In my opinion, the only way where it will be advantageous, when it will be beneficial, if you have full mixing console. When you don't need to process track by track, if you have large mixing console, something like SSL 4000 or SSL Duality, then you start to make little adjustments here, there. You can go to outboard compressor and change attack, you can have a bit less compression, it will be working. But if you want to process track by track, I really don't recommend that, it will never be working. Of course you can say, I'm gonna apply equalizer, some digital EQ later. I'm gonna grab FAB filter EQ and I'm gonna put it if I want some additional adjustments. But don't you think that using new processing in your audio waveform, it's all the time harmful a bit? Because let's say you put FAB filter EQ. Do you know that equalizer is a phase dependable tool? So no matter what you do with EQ, you change phase a bit. Even linear phase equalizers, they only minimize phase shifts, but they don't exclude phase shifts at all. So the problem is, you're gonna process your signal maybe to cut a bit more or a bit less, but the problem is you will affect on phase. Your drum will be sounding a bit maybe washed out, maybe not that solid or focused like it was after analog processing. If you use analog, it's much better to use it as a real-time processor. So I personally, what I do for myself nowadays, I already don't prefer to process tracks, track by track with analog, because I understand it's really complicated process. Instead, I use analog channel strip as a real-time processor just for one instrument of my mix. I can choose maybe the most important element of my mix, maybe lead vocal or snare drum, and I use this EQ, one of these EQs, let's say this compressor, just let's say for lead vocal and nothing else. In this case, I always set up it in similar way. If I want to go back and change some settings like fine-tuning process, I always can do it, because we consider this plugin like all the time staying here and working all the time when you hit play button. In this case, it will be working. Of course, we can include in disadvantages of analog its price. After years they can be broken, sometimes it needs some service, some potentiometers can be too old or something like that, so it can be disadvantages of having analog. But let's imagine you decide to process tracks by tracks, it takes a lot of time. First of all, you need to, if your song lasts for 4 minutes, you will need to wait for 4 minutes for a kick in, then 4 minutes for the kick out, then 4 minutes, if you work with electronic music, it will be 4 minutes for kick, 4 minutes for snare, 4 minutes for the hi-hat, 4 minutes for shaker, 4 minutes for the lead synth, 4 minutes for the Pluck synth, left side, 4 minutes for the Pluck synth right side, it will be 4 minutes for pad left, it will be 4 minutes for pad right. As you can see, it's absolutely inconvenient. But to be totally honest, do you think we're all perfect? Of course not, we make a lot of mistakes. I remember myself, like, I set up something, I just simply forgot to press some button, or I forgot just to engage EQ or something like that, you know. Maybe I wanted shell filter, but I forgot, and I keep bell filter mode on some bands of equalizer. And then after 4 minutes I see it and I say, oh my god, I need to start again. Now I prepared a little test for you. Let's have some fun and let's make a little test, little comparison. This project is pretty bullshit music, I wrote it just for my vlog. I do vlog about how I live in Canada. It's in foreign language, don't even try to watch it. But anyway, I make these funny jokes and I need some scary music for some situations. I wrote this scary music. Let's listen to it a bit. It's almost fully processed by Analog Chain, this one, 9000 series. I didn't use 4000 equalizer, but I used this EQ from Alpha Channel, I used this EQ from 9000 series EQ, I use 9000 series compressor, and filters from Preamp module. It sounds like this. You know, it's for these kind of confusing situations, funny kind of situations in the video. So my question is for you, put your answer in the comment section, try to recognize which track was processed by a plugin. Only one element of this mix was processed by a plugin. It could be, let's say, hi-hat, it could be a kick, it could be a snare, it could be a bass, it could be electric piano, it could be this kind of a harp. In Russian accent it will be a harp. A harp. So it's a harp, right? So this instrument sounds like this. So it's a harp, it's a lead synthesizer. Then we have electric piano. Then a bass. And then drums. So try to recognize which instrument is processed by a plugin. If you couldn't recognize which one was a plugin, it just means, who cares, right? Plugin or analog, if it sounds right, it sounds right. So I'm gonna play the whole mix for you again. Try to isolate it exactly in the mix. Okay, so put your answer, and I promise in 7 days after I upload this video, you can come back to this video to check answers, and after 7 days I'm gonna answer each comment, so maybe it will be like notification for you that you have the answer for your question. Let's make a conclusion. My suggestion for you, in my opinion, if you start only or you're on the way, don't waste your $1,000 and many years until you get all equipment just to realize that it's not about equipment. It's all about your skills and ability to see all these little molecules of audio. When you like really advanced audio engineer with enormous amount of knowledge. This is exactly what I teach people on my course, and we train ability to make decisions and see little molecules of tracks. And we not just make it like randomly, we compare mixes with top sounding mixes of all time, not making any excuses. If it sounds worse, we say it sounds worse and let's make it better until we will be at the same level. Higher results if you invest your time and money in practicing, comparing to the reference tracks, instead of making excuses and saying something like, I still don't have this equipment. This is exactly what I teach guys on my course, to have skills, instead of some marketing bullshit like what I need to buy next. Don't forget to subscribe and hit notification bell, put a comment and like. In this case, you support the channel. You also can send me an email to ask if there is an opportunity to attend one trial class with current students to check the course. And don't forget, this video was just some additional stuff. If you want like serious education, check the course. This course is really about real results.